The valley is quiet now, silent, except for the wind rolling down from the Ulriken Mountains, the same wind that carried the smoke, the same wind that brought a lone hiker to one of the strangest discoveries in Norwegian history. But to understand what happened in that icy ravine in 1970, we have to take our time. We have to walk slowly. Because nothing about this case is simple, not the evidence, not the identities, not the silence that followed. Before we go any deeper, let me say this. If you're the kind of person who refuses to look away from mysteries that authorities try to close too quickly, make sure you subscribe. Cases like this, cases that never let go, that's what we explore here. Now back to Norway. It was late November, just before winter would fully grip Bergen. Two hikers, a father and his young daughters, were moving to the foothills of Isdalen. In Norway, the place already carried a name whispered by mountaineers. Death Valley, a steep, shadowed place where fog hangs thicker than smoke and the rocks shift under your feet. The father spotted something strange first, a dark-shaped line between charred rocks. His daughter stepped closer, thinking it might be a burned animal. But the moment the wind shifted, the shape took on the unmistakable outline of a human body. The woman was lying on her back, clothes scorched, arms bent strangely. Her left side burned so intensely that pieces of her clothing had melted into the skin. Her face was unrecognizable. When police arrived, they studied the scene in total confusion. The woman's belongings were scattered around her body, laid out as if someone had arranged them. 2 plastic bottles that smelled of gasoline, a broken umbrella, a wristwatch, a few pieces of jewelry, but they weren't on her. They were placed beside her, almost ritualistically. There were no footprints leading to or away from her. Nothing but snow, ash, and silence. At first, investigators were convinced it was suicide. Norway in 1970 was quiet, insulated, and not used to dramatic crimes. But doubts began forming immediately. For one, who sets themselves on fire in a remote mountain valley? Who removes their own identifying belongings, scrapes off labels from clothing, and meticulously arranges personal items before dying? One officer later admitted that the scene felt staged, as if whoever placed her there wanted her to be found, but not understood. Then there was the most chilling detail. The woman had been alive when the flames ignited. Traces of thick blacks were found in her lungs, proof she was breathing in smoke. Somebody wanted her to suffer, or somebody wanted her death to look a certain way. But the story was only beginning. The pathologist noted something odd immediately. The woman was in extremely good physical condition. Athletic, maybe in her 30s. Straight black hair. Small internal bruises that didn't quite match a fall. And then dental work. Not just any kind of dental work. Advanced techniques that didn't match Norwegian medical practice. Methods seen more commonly in Switzerland, or sometimes in certain intelligence circles. Her fingerprints? Sanded down. Her labels? Cut from every piece of clothing. Her luggage? Nowhere to be found. The police were baffled, but they weren't prepared for the next twist. The one that would shatter any hope of this being a simple case. A few days later, police received a call from the Bergen railway station. 2 suitcases, unclaimed, sitting in a storage locker. One officer opened them and froze. Women's clothing, a notebook, a wig, cosmetics, prescription-free medication, but no identity, no passport, no photographs, no letters. Every single label had been cut out from every garment. Inside one of the suitcases, folded neatly beneath a patterned scarf, was a handwritten note filled with what looked like numbers and coded phrases. Nothing that made sense on first reading. And there was more: traces of fingerprints, partial, almost erased. Officers believed they belonged to the same woman found in the valley. Days of investigation revealed a trail across Norway. Hotel rooms checked under various names. All fake. She changed outfits constantly. She wore wigs. She signed hotel registers with different handwriting styles. And in every town, she seemed to keep to herself, but always watching, always alert. Witnesses describe her as striking, foreign, well-dressed, sometimes even extremely nervous. One waiter recalled she spoke several languages: German, French, Flemish, but with an accent difficult to pin down. She carried herself like someone trained not to be noticed, or someone trained to notice everything. The last days of her life were documented by small, mundane observations. A hotel staff member watched her eat dinner alone, eyes moving constantly, scanning everyone in the room. A cleaner found her suitcase strangely heavy, despite looking empty. One guest recalled her smelling faintly of garlic and chemical smoke, an odd combination that later matched military-grade self-defense sprays and certain types of explosives residue. Multiple witnesses claim men were following her. Whether this was paranoia or truth has never been settled. But people remembered the way she sat, the way she moved, the way she watched the door as she ate, as if she expected somebody, as if she feared somebody, as if she was counting down her final hours. 3 days before her body was found, the Isdal Woman was seen in downtown Bergen. She wore a dark dress, her hair tucked beneath a clean, elegant wig. She bought a seat reservation for the train, paid in cash, then abruptly changed her mind. A taxi driver remembered her well, describing her face as tense and withdrawn. She spoke English, but slowly, choosing every word carefully. He dropped her off near the hiking trails leading to Isdalen. She asked to be alone. It was the last time anyone saw her alive. The official verdict? Suicide. Authorities closed the case quickly. Too quickly. But the public didn't accept it. Journalists didn't accept it. Even several investigators quietly admitted that suicide didn't fit anything they saw. Over the next decades, the questions only grew larger. Why was she traveling under multiple identities? Who taught her to erase fingerprints? Why were her belongings arranged around her body? Why was she alive when the fire started? And why did the Norwegian government seem so eager to conclude the case without further inquiry? As the Cold War deepened across Europe, whispers grew louder. Was she a courier? A spy? A woman caught between nations and silenced before she could speak? The deeper investigators dug, the stranger the trail became. Every discovery seemed designed to answer one question and open 5 more. By the time the suitcases were laid out in the Bergen police basement, under bright fluorescent lights, with detectives whispering quietly around the table, it already felt like the Isdal Woman wasn't just a lone traveler. She felt like part of something larger, something that didn't want to be understood. The first suitcase was ordinary enough at a glance. Neatly folded clothes, mostly high quality but practical. No expensive jewelry, no luxury brands. She packed like someone used to moving often, someone who traveled with intention rather than comfort. But the second suitcase, that one changed everything. Inside was a small notepad with strange writing, sequences of numbers, short phrases, shorthand that looked like travel codes or military notations. Investigators stared at the pages, struggling to decode them. To this day, the meaning is still debated. Some believe they represent train schedules. Others think they were internal codes, The kind couriers used during the Cold War to pass information without ever writing a full message. There was also a pair of prescription-free glasses, but with the lenses removed, a lighter with the fuel emptied, a spoon with a decorative handle, but from a hotel she never stayed at, and then a plastic bag containing a strong scent, garlic mixed with chemicals. Experts later connected that smell to compounds used in certain types of self-defense sprays, specifically those used by intelligence personnel traveling in hostile regions. It wasn't proof, but it was a red flag big enough to cast a shadow across the entire room. Perhaps the most unsettling item wasn't the coded notebook or the strange utensils, but the wig. It was dark brown, styled neatly, high quality. The kind used not for fashion, but for disguise. One hotel receptionist remembered it clearly. She said the woman looked different with it on, almost like she shifted personalities when she wore it. Another staff member said she wore the wig when meeting someone, a man, in the hotel lobby. But no one could recall the man's face. It was as if people saw him, but didn't. A shadow walking beside a shadow. The hotel registry books became a gold mine. She had checked in under multiple names. Fenella Lorch, Claudia Tealt, Vera Schlossner, Alexia Zarnmerches. Each name belonged to no one, not in Norway, not anywhere else in Europe. But something more disturbing emerged. The handwriting used to sign the forms was inconsistent, deliberately inconsistent, sometimes slanted, sometimes upright, sometimes with loops, sometimes sharp. Professionals who later examined it said the variety looked trained, like someone conditioned to obscure their identity. Witnesses across Norway provided descriptions. She was elegant. She was anxious. She seemed to be waiting for someone. She always paid in cash. She studied maps constantly. She burned something in her sink. I remember the smell. And then there was a final witness, the one who provided the detail that still haunts the case today. A hotel maid recalled cleaning the woman's room days before the death. She found the woman sitting on the bed, leaning over a metal tray. A faint smell drifted from it, the smell of burning rubber, chemicals, and something sharp. The woman looked up abruptly, startled, and immediately closed the tray. She apologized. She spoke politely, but her hands were shaking. Later, that same smell, the same chemicals, would be found on her belongings in the valley. Whatever she was burning in that hotel room was never found again. Multiple witnesses in multiple cities described the same thing. Man, always alone, always arriving shortly after she did, never speaking to her publicly, never registering their names. One guest remembered seeing two men in suits following her through the lobby of her hotel in Trondheim. A restaurant worker in Stavanger recalled a man staring at her intensely while pretending to read a newspaper. A train conductor said he saw her speaking quietly, urgently, with a man in a dark coat. None of those men were ever identified. None came forward, and none were recorded checking into hotels near her. It was as if they lived in the shadows, or as if they were meant to. A small but crucial detail came from the autopsy report. Inside her blood, investigators found traces of a powerful sleeping medication, phenymal, a barbiturate, not enough to kill her, but enough to weaken her, disorient her, and leave her vulnerable. Some believed she was preparing for suicide, but the dosage was too low for that. Others believed she was being drugged, slowly, subtly, by someone she met during her travels. But there was a third possibility, the one investigators didn't speak openly about in 1970. She might have been using it to stay calm. Spies and couriers often did during high-stress operations, especially when traveling with sensitive information. If she was involved in intelligence work, even peripherally, fentanyl wasn't unusual. It was expected. Norwegian detectives noticed something curious about her footwear. Her boots were clean, impossibly clean, despite the muddy terrain leading into Isdalen. They looked wiped, almost polished. This detail led to two theories. One, someone carried her into the valley, but that contradicted the soot in her lungs. Two, she walked into the valley on her own, but avoided the muddy main path, meaning she knew the terrain, or someone guided her. Veteran hikers pointed out that only locals or trained operatives would know the narrow side trails that bypassed the mud and rocks. The Isdal Woman had never been to Bergen before, at least not under any known identity. So how did she know the secret paths? Or who showed them to her? A breakthrough arrived too late, nearly a week after her body was found. A witness stepped forward with a detail that still fuels the mystery today. He said he saw the Isdal Woman walking near a bridge in Bergen. She stood with two men, both sharply dressed, both foreign-looking. They talked quietly. The woman seemed agitated, and then she said something in German. Not a sentence, just 4 words. Ich komme später, Alien. I'll come later, alone. It was the last time she was seen outside the valley. Who were the men? What did they want? Why was she meeting them again, alone, in a deserted mountain ravine? No one knows. But what we do know is that she arrived in Isdalen hours before sunset and never came out again. The pathologist estimated she died sometime in the late evening. Her clothes burned first, her lungs filled with smoke. She collapsed backward. The fire consumed her face. Whether she started that fire herself, whether someone stood and watched it happen, whether someone lit it for her, that remains the most haunting unknown. And yet, as investigators worked, something unnerving unfolded behind the scenes. Officials began to interfere. Evidence was quietly shelved. Documents disappeared, and certain lines of questioning were discouraged. Why? Because this wasn't just a death. This was 1970. The Cold War. A continent full of spies, dead drops, coded messages, and silent watchers in hotel lobbies. And whatever the Isdal Woman was involved in, someone wanted the truth buried deeper than that smoke-filled valley. In the early days of the investigation, the word spy was whispered only behind closed doors. No one wanted that label to escape into newspapers. Not in a neutral country. Not in a nation where foreign intelligence agencies quietly operated in the shadows, observing shipping lanes, NATO installations, and maritime testing sites. But the clues were undeniable. Multiple identities. Fluency in several European languages. Constant travel. A coded notebook. Disguises. Barbiturates. Erased fingerprints. Chemical residue. Men silently following her across cities. A staged death scene. These weren't the habits of an ordinary tourist. These were the habits of someone trained, someone monitored, someone who knew how to disappear until the day she didn't. Norwegian intelligence never commented publicly on her death, but internally, she became a file that nobody wanted to claim, not police, not military, not the security services. That alone speaks volumes. The year was 1970, a time when NATO had begun testing advanced maritime equipment along the Norwegian coast. New listening devices, new tracking systems, technologies that foreign intelligence agencies were desperate to obtain. Several of the towns where the Isdal Woman stayed, several of the train routes she used, Several of the sites she visited all lined up with classified military installations. Coincidence? Possibly, but unlikely. One anonymous source, an officer with knowledge of Cold War surveillance, later stated that she moved through Norway exactly the way foreign intelligence couriers did, never staying long, never drawing attention, using hotels with predictable routines, paying in cash, switching identities every few days. But if she was a courier, who was she delivering information to? And what information was worth killing for? One of the most troubling discoveries wasn't found in a suitcase. It was found in a police office decades later. Old reports, dusty and ignored, revealed a pattern. Every identity she used was crafted from fragments of different European names. German first names, Belgian city surnames, Swiss-sounding combinations, a few French influences, and none of them matched an actual human being. She was a woman built entirely from shadows. That left investigators with two theories. One, she was a spy trained to move between borders without leaving a footprint. Two, she was running from someone, possibly an intelligence service, and created her own fake identities for protection. Both explanations are plausible. Both are terrifying, because either she was part of a clandestine network, or she was hunted by one. A breakthrough came when a journalist, years after the official investigation had ended, revisited the coded notes found in her suitcase. After comparing the sequences with historical train routes, he realized something stunning. The numbers matched ferry and train departure times. The letters matched cities and regions in shorthand. She was tracking her movement with military-like precision, but there was something more. Several of the short phrases appeared only on the days she stayed near naval testing sites. Skeptics insisted this proved nothing. Supporters argued it proved everything. Yet the most chilling element wasn't the code itself. It was what was missing from the notes. There was no mention of the day she died. No entry for Isdalen. No indication that she ever planned to be there. As if she never meant to go or never meant to return. One of the most controversial testimonies came from a man who worked near a NATO facility. He claimed he met the woman weeks before her death. She asked him questions, not personal questions, but technical ones. How far does the signal reach? Which direction does the testing occur? How often do ships depart? She seemed nervous, he said, but very deliberate. When investigators followed up on a statement, they were told by unnamed officials to drop it. He wasn't re-interviewed. His file disappeared. And that's when Norwegian reporters realized something unsettling. Every time the case brushed against military topics, doors quietly closed. Encounter. A woman working at the Stenderson Lodge came forward years later, claiming she served the Isdal Woman dinner one evening. The woman ate quickly, barely touching her food. She kept glancing behind her, as if expecting someone to enter. When she did speak, it was only to ask about the quickest way to reach Fingerprints, one of the least traveled trails leading into Isdalen. She didn't ask like a tourist. She asked like someone mapping an escape route. When the server hesitated, the woman repeated the question, more urgently. Later, when the server heard of the burned body found in the valley, she said she felt sick. The path she described was the same rugged trail where the woman would be found. Only days later, fire experts who studied the case pointed out something strange. A fire hot enough to destroy facial features. A fire strong enough to melt clothing against skin. A fire powerful enough to char the surrounding rocks. That required accelerants. Multiple accelerants. This wasn't a small, impulsive flame. It was constructed. But then, the strangest detail of all. Despite the heat, the surrounding brush didn't catch fire, as if the flames were controlled, directed, contained. Norwegian investigators never explained how a fire that intense didn't spread naturally. One expert years later said quietly, "It was as if someone wanted her destroyed, but didn't want the forest to burn." Among the hotel records, one detail stood out. She made no phone calls. None. Not to family. Not to colleagues. Not to reservations. Not to friends. Every traveler called someone, but she didn't. Instead, she relied on handwritten notes, face-to-face questions, and train schedules memorized by heart. This wasn't just secrecy. This was protocol. In the suitcase, investigators found something that looked like a diary, a small booklet filled with dates and places. But it wasn't personal. There were no emotions, no reflections, no opinions, just routes, times, distances, departures. Every line read like a mission log, and perhaps the most chilling line was written days before her death. Check with the contact. Who was the contact? A handler? An informant? A partner? The very person she was running from? No one knows. No one ever will. As the investigation reached its height, something eerie unfolded. Several government representatives visited the police offices, not to assist, not to clarify, but to observe. They didn't offer information. They didn't ask the usual questions. They simply appeared, watched, and left. More than one officer said they felt intimidated. Others said they felt monitored. One said, "It was clear we were not expected to find anything." This wasn't a foreign operation. This was Norway's own silence. A silence more chilling than any spy story. In the years after her death, Norwegian police kept a secret. They had taken a photograph of her reconstructed face. Not for circulation, not for the public, but for internal identification. It showed a calm, composed-looking woman, someone you might meet in a hotel lobby or passing through a ferry terminal. Decades later, when the image finally surfaced, it shocked Europe. Witnesses came forward from Germany, claiming they had seen her before, in Hamburg, in Cologne, in Frankfurt. A former hotel worker swore she checked in under a false name in 1969. Another remembered selling her a pair of gloves. Scattered memories. Yes, but the consistency was chilling. She had been everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Years after the case closed, a retired investigator revealed something almost no one knew. A parcel had been sent to a post office in the city where the Isdal Woman stayed, addressed only to initials. The parcel was never collected. Inside were foreign beauty products and a pair of gloves, expensive, imported, and uncommon in Norway at the time. Some believed she ordered them herself. Others believed the parcel came from someone outside Norway, someone who knew her exact movements. Those who studied Cold War operations saw something else. Dead drop behavior. A safe place to receive items while traveling. A method used by couriers passing through hostile or monitored regions. If that's true, then someone knew she was coming. And someone expected her to pick it up. Why she didn't is another question buried with her. The coded notebook found in her suitcase was re-examined decades later by cryptologists. Patterns emerged. Repeated references to identical cities. Dates tied to ferry lines. Letters aligned with NATO-linked locations. Abbreviations used by several European intelligence networks. Most telling of all, certain codes matched the travel patterns of known foreign operatives during 1969 and 1970. This wasn't coincidence. It was coordination. whether she was delivering information, picking it up, or observing military activity. She was on a route used by spies across Europe, and she followed it with precision. In 2011, a new witness stepped forward, someone who had remained silent for 4 decades. He said he met the woman near the railway station days before her death. She was standing alone, holding her suitcase tightly, staring at the schedule board. He approached her, thinking she looked lost. When he asked if she needed help, she lowered her voice and said, "I am not who they think I am." Then she glanced over her shoulder at 2 men watching her from a distance. The witness said her fear was unmistakable. He walked away quickly. He never forgot the look in her eyes, and he never came forward until everyone involved was either retired or dead. As journalists revisited the case, they made an unsettling discovery. Critical pieces of evidence were missing from the archives. Gone. Several pages from the original autopsy report, a list of items found in the suitcases, early witness statements, the original coded notebook, photographs of the valley, a report linking her travel to military sites. Norwegian police claimed the documents had likely been misplaced, but people close to the investigation believed otherwise. One retired officer said bluntly, "There were things we were not allowed to say, and things we were not allowed to keep." That single sentence changed everything. When DNA extraction technology advanced, Norway retested tissue samples from the woman. This revealed she had Mediterranean genetic markers, possibly Italian, French, Spanish, or Balkan. But even with that, no country claimed her. No missing person report matched her. No embassy recognized her. Not one nation stepped forward. If she was a spy, nobody would claim her. If she was a runaway, someone would have looked for her. If she was a tourist, someone back home would have wondered where she went. But there was nothing. She was invisible, even in the age of DNA. One of the strangest revelations came in the 1990s, when a German family contacted Norwegian authorities. Their elderly mother, a quiet, serious woman, had once told them a story before she died. She said that in the late 1960s, she worked for an organization she refused to name. Her job was to meet couriers traveling across Europe. She said one of them was a young woman with dark hair who used wigs and multiple names. The elderly woman claimed the girl was scared. She trusted no one. And then one day, she didn't show up. They said she disappeared. Her children cannot prove the story, but everything about it aligns with the life and death of the Isdal Woman. Modern intelligence experts agree on one thing. The Isdal Woman case looks less like a suicide and more like a termination. Her death was violent, controlled, staged, precise, and designed to erase her. But whoever orchestrated it made one mistake. Something small, something they probably didn't think mattered. They left her body intact enough to be found. They left her teeth untouched. They left her belongings partially burned. They left fragments of her notes. They left her trail of hotel registrations. They left witnesses. They left just enough for the world to realize she existed, she mattered, and someone wanted her story hidden. We are left with a woman who spoke many languages, traveled constantly, lived alone, trusted no one, watched everyone, used disguises, destroyed documents, feared something, died violently, left no trace of her true identity. Her grave in Bergen is simple, a plain white cross. The inscription reads, "Til oem en Ukjenkvinn," in memory of an unknown woman. Flowers still appear there, placed by strangers, people who never knew her, people who want to understand her, people who refuse to let her be forgotten, because she is more than a mystery. She is a reminder of how deeply a story can be buried, and how fiercely it can fight its way back to light.